Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional and expert in transformation and change management from Indianapolis, USA, Stefanie Krievins. Stefanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ashutosh. Great to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you. Stefanie is the president of the Change Architects by SK and Co. So, Stefanie, before we talk of transformation and change management, tell me about your own journey in brief.
Yeah, so I was always a problem solver in my career. When I had an employer, I was always the first person to hold a job. When one of my managers couldn't figure out how to solve something, it was, let's give it to Stefanie.
Mm.
And finally, my first boss out of grad school, I was actually wasn't working for him as an employee any longer. I was doing some contract work for him. We were working on this big, hairy problem, and he goes, "Man, you're really good at fixing hot messes." I was like,
Mhm.
I am. Thank you. I create order out of chaos. And so that's just how my mind is wired, is when
Mhm.
things are complex and there's emotions everywhere and there seems like there's so many problems and not enough time to solve them.
Mhm.
I am wired to simplify, to cut to the heart of the matter, to just be really incisive and say, if we start right here, this is the one thing that's going to create leverage to drive change for future problems. And so that's played out in nonprofits, local and national. That's played out in HR consulting company.
Mhm.
And 10 years ago, I went out on my own to become a life coach and transition that into executive coaching, and now really change management coaching and working with IT leaders and their organizations to figure out, how do we simplify? How do we drive transformation that the business needs and has been promised to our colleagues?
How fascinating. But why does everyone think change is so hard?
How much time you got?
Yes.
No, I think for me, as a really good starting place is, we have to remember that when we're presented with change from our manager, our manager's managers, even if we're the leader driving change, there is an element of feeling like we're losing autonomy.
Mhm.
And that's where humans kind of lose their biscuits a little bit, kind of
Mhm.
get really get emotionally overwhelmed, because we hear change as a fear-based response because of our limbic system in our brains. And
Mhm.
so, and it's actually a very simple set of processes that goes back to the formation of humans and how we form community. So
Mhm.
humans stayed safe as humans. We stayed alive because we banded together with our community, with our fellow humans around a campfire
Mhm.
to survive, to each play a role, to each watch out for each other. So
Mhm.
when decisions are made for us, our brain hears, oh my gosh, we're losing autonomy. If we're losing autonomy, we're losing safety.
Mhm.
Now, back then, what that meant was certain death. In 2024 and beyond, and it's been this way for a long time, it's not certain death. It just means you need to fill out your reports in a slightly different way, or log into a new kind of technology, or do project management in a new way. But without self-awareness, our brains go into our limbic system, which is the base function of our brain, and it walks through this illogical path of change equals isolation from fellow humans, isolation from fellow humans equals death. It
Mhm.
really is quite that simple. Yet, if you don't know that's what's happening, we freak out, we take it out on our managers, we take it out on our leaders, and we think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is so hard. And the leader is literally going, no, we're just going to use a new project management process, and
Mhm.
I need you to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So as a leader, we have to understand that that is what our employees are going through as we're having those conversations. It, of
Mhm.
course, is not about a project management system
Yeah.
or implementing a new structure or launching a new project. Without self-awareness, we go to this equals certain death because
Mhm.
we don't have awareness as to how our brains are processing the
Fascinating.
information.
Great
Yep.
response. And, Stephanie, most of us are really wired to l- like status quo or maybe even status quo ante.
Mm.
What, in your view, are some of the reasons why transformation and change efforts often fail?
Um, let's connect it first to the prior answer. A
Yeah.
lot of leaders lack the coaching skills to help
Mhm.
their employees build self-awareness and then navigate themselves through the change.
Right.
A lot of leaders take on the responsibility of getting their employees on board and engaging in that change and transformation.
Mhm.
And so, beyond coaching that employee to engage themselves, I believe leaders need a mind shift to say,
Mhm.
it is your responsibility, individual contributor, other manager, to engage and motivate yourself in the change. I can't do that for you. I can't do that work for you. So,
Mhm.
leaders need to put the responsibility back where it belongs. I think leaders need to create certainty during uncertainty. And
Mhm.
what that means is being willing to say, we don't know everything that's going to go right or wrong, but
Mhm.
here's the process that we're going to work. Here's the framework. I believe having a solid framework for driving transformation
Mhm.
helps us create certainty for our colleagues, for those that worked through us, to say,
Mhm.
when things go off the rails, we know how we're going to get them back on track. We
Right.
don't
Right.
we don't know how they're going to go off the rails,
Mhm.
but we know how we're going to fix it if it does. We know what success looks like, so we know when to stop if we're not being successful.
Mhm.
I believe having stronger frameworks that we adhere to creates that certainty that our colleagues need to stay engaged in the change.
Well said. And you spoke of a framework. What, in
Mhm.
your view, are some of the key elements of a successful transformation roadmap or framework?
So, first and foremost, I think we need to identify when we are driving transformation versus organizational change versus individual change, and using a more holistic framework. So,
Mhm.
oftentimes, we think transformation is implementing a new system, a new ERP. The ERP is actually organizational change, which means we're installing a new piece of technology, we're customizing it, we're creating training material so folks
Mhm.
understand how to use it. But really, an ERP is designed to keep the business flowing status quo. The transformation is redesigning what that new ERP
Right.
will deliver for the business so that the
Mhm.
business can get new results and
Mhm.
engage with customers and other stakeholders in new ways. And
Mhm.
so separating out those levels, and then looking at the individual change and creating separate plans for that that's involved with an ERP implementation
Mhm.
across the organization.
Mhm.
So, first framework is recognizing when you have change at those three different levels.
Right.
The second framework that I use is a communication framework called 7 by 7 by 7.
Mhm.
And this means anytime you're driving transformation, we need communication plans that have 7 channels, 7 messages, rinse and repeated 7 times,
Mhm.
because it takes that frequency, it takes that shaping of the message to tailor to different stakeholder groups to truly be effective.
Well said. And I love the 777 uh, framework. But when I was reading about you preparing for my conversation, I also read about the change architecture framework that you have developed.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, thank you. So, this has come over my years of working with organizations trying to drive organizational change and
Mm.
transformation. And there's a lot of really traditional tools out there that I don't think have kept up with the speed of change for the 21st century.
Mhm.
Some of them are antiquated, maybe a little too traditional. Some of
Mhm.
them aren't thorough enough and take into account the human experience when
Mhm.
driving change.
Mhm.
I like to joke when I'm doing presentations, if you only work with robots, you don't need to listen to me talk. But if you're going
Correct.
to work with human beings, here's what it takes to drive change and keep
Right.
and help them stay engaged in the process, because none of us do this work alone, right?
Right.
We all do it with our fellow humans. So the change architecture takes into account the human experience in the workplace as it relates to change. Again, certainty, creating certainty where there's uncertainty. It also takes into account how we need to simplify the work moving forward
Mhm.
and bring people together. And so, what I layer into the change architecture is change capacity. So, a data backed tool to help us understand how flexible and nimble and is your culture for change.
Mhm.
What's the talent experience around change?
Mhm.
During change, people, and this is very simple, people's job descriptions change,
Correct.
and no one closes the loop to go back and say, we need a clear job description to drive this change forward, to say, this is what the next 3 years looks like for this role.
Mhm.
That creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates the perception of certain death. Let's
Mhm.
get clear job descriptions up again. And
Right.
so we focus on some of the foundational elements of talent experience, change capacity, leadership development. Because again, if you're going to get new results in 5 years, you need a new type of leader to
Mhm.
drive those results.
Mhm.
And then simplifying and truly creating 100% adoption of project management methodology. That
Yep.
could be agile, that could be anything, whatever works for your culture, but we
Mhm.
must have it 100% adopted. That's our
Mhm.
specialty. And then more thorough communication from mid-level all the way up to the C-suite to
Mhm.
engage employees so they really understand what it takes to be engaged in this new company that you all are creating together.
Well said. My other question is that, most organizations, certainly the large, older organizations,
Hmm.
and their people are facing challenges from technology.
Hmm.
And, with AI and Chat GPT and so many new technologies coming in, my
Yes.
question is, how can organizations and their leaders leverage technology to facilitate change?
Oh, this is a good one. I think the first question is make the decision how.
Mm,
Make the decision. What is your company? What does it stand for? What is its vision? What is its strategy?
mhm,
Hold tightly to that vision.
mhm,
And then the answer to how does technology impact those strategies becomes
mhm,
very clear.
mhm,
I think right now, because we're in such an age of disruption, a lot of leaders, a lot of senior leaders feel compelled to wait to see what the technology is going to do and then make a decision. I say stand confidently in your vision and mission.
mhm.
Then you get to decide. You get to be the filter as to how to use that technology. So that's the first response. And I think we need to remember that AI is a tool in the digital transformation tool
Yeah,
belt, not the other way
correct.
around. We're losing sight of that conversation right now. Digital transformation, business transformation is about putting our stakeholders at the forefront of our work and serving them in a new way because of technology,
Mhm.
not taking technology and making our stakeholders use it in a new
Correct.
way. And so
Correct.
we need to reorder that logic. And so um, it's it is standing tall and confidently and making the decision to be about something in your
Mhm,
company first and
mhm,
foremost. Remembering the order of where technology fits. The next level to that is simplify technology. I
mhm,
was talking to the the director of digital products at a large telecom company. She
mhm,
said they have 7 CRMs.
mhm. Wow.
That is the very definition of creating a hot mess and
Mhm,
complexity that doesn't
mhm,
need to exist. As leaders, insist right now on simplifying our tech stack.
mhm,
You're going to have to give up functionality, and we need to be okay with that. But 7 CRMs or 7 video calling tools or besides communication tactics,
mhm,
7 pieces of technology that in essence do the same thing
mhm,
creates a lot of sideways energy, and you lose a ton of abilities to analyze your data,
mhm,
connect people, connect with
mhm.
stakeholders because you're in too many systems. I think with
Interesting.
this all this tech blowing up, we need to focus on simplicity.
Fascinating. And there's another aspect that's, most organizations are confronted with post the pandemic.
Hmm.
Earlier, there used to be silos within organizations, but now
Yes.
people are sitting and working from home or have hybrid working. How do you help organizations facilitate change in that kind of an environment?
Mm, oh gosh, this is such a loaded question right now, isn't
Mhm.
it?
Absolutely.
This might seem overly simplistic, but I
Mhm.
think we need to create bigger budgets for in-person gatherings to continue to prioritize that.
Right.
For any company that says that they are innovative, innovation happens when we are physically together. There are
Mhm.
limits, and the studies show that there are limits to how much innovation and connection truly happen virtually. And
Mhm.
it's actually the numbers aren't very good. So we've got
Mhm.
to get our people physically together to brainstorm, to innovate. A
Mhm.
lot of execution can then happen remotely or in hybrid
Mhm.
environments. And so I think the challenge for leaders is just to be very intentional around when do we when do we lead in person? When do we lead remotely? And if we're going to do work together in a hybrid format, we've got to up our technology game to make that happen. And unfortunately, that requires very huge investments in AV technology
Mhm.
to truly get us connected that a lot of companies just haven't made yet
Mhm.
because they don't see the value in it. We get asked to do hybrid trainings and hybrid coaching quite frequently, and we've had to decline because our ability to build connection
Right.
when some of us are together in a room and some folks are virtually is really not possible without some truly immersive technology,
Mhm. Mhm.
which requires tens of thousands of dollars that a lot of our Fortune 500 companies can invest in, but our
Mhm.
mid-market friends just don't have that kind of cash,
Mhm.
understandably.
Mhm.
But let's invest in bringing people together
Mhm.
quarterly at the very
Yeah.
least. I think that will help smooth out a lot of the work that gets executed virtually.
Very well said. And Stephanie, my next question is that how do you support leaders or how do you coach leaders to develop a culture that embraces change management and transformation?
I love this question. So, the very nature of coaching requires a slightly longer timeline to
Mm.
unlearn some old habits and relearn some new habits that
Correct.
serve the workplace in 2024 and beyond. And so we focus on clear vision, knowing who you are as a leader and how you want to show up. That's kind of a cliched answer for someone who does coaching,
Mm.
and that answer doesn't come from just sitting down, talking to a coach, sitting down and filling out some reflections. It comes
Mm.
from real life interaction with our colleagues. So, for example, I've had a leader, a CIO, an SVP of IT that I've worked with for quite a while now. I've known him since 2017, and he's so kind. He always posts on LinkedIn about how it changed his life.
Mhm.
But the work that we did almost every single session while he was driving global transformation in his IT organization was,
Mhm.
how do I want to show up? What tools do I want to use to
Mhm.
lead my people? And then as a coach, I'm his anchor to hold him accountable to living that out in real life.
Mhm.
But almost what happens behind closed doors with a coach is almost always answering the question, how do I want to do this? How do I want to live this out? What are my values that I want to bring to play? What
Mhm.
kind of leader do I want to be in this situation?
Mhm.
When you can go into hard conversations, projects that are way over budget and way over time
Mhm.
with that true sense of self, you can lead confidently. That confidence will bring your people along.
Mhm. Well said. And how important is it to involve the employees when it comes to change management and employees at all levels?
Yes. It's super important. Right now we're in this really awkward transition of leadership styles, and we've been there for a while. My baby boomer colleagues, my older Gen Xers have learned and relied on a command and control style of leadership where they dictate actions, they dictate results, they dictate processes. That certainly has a place, especially when things are really, really hard in the
Mhm.
environment. But we have to remember that those that are closest to the problem also have a firsthand experience of what is going on.
Mm.
And so I see it as a constant feedback loop now. It's
Right.
not an either or. No one stakeholder group, no one level gets to decide all of the answers. We need to build in very frequent feedback loops into our organization. And so one of the reasons that employees feel like they lose autonomy when transformation plans are unrolled, to connect it back to our first
Mhm.
question, is because the leader never says, here's the feedback loop that we've
Right.
built in 1 month. We're going to come back and ask you how it's going. We're going to ask you what adjustments we need to make.
Mm.
But bottom line is that this ERP will be fully implemented in the next year. We've already extended the timeline by 18 months.
Mhm.
We're not going to extend the timeline any longer.
Mm.
By the end of 2024, this ERP will be fully operational. Here's the definition of that. I need to understand from you, what does it take to make the ERP fully operational by the end of 2024? That's non-negotiable. What is negotiable, where we are going to get your feedback, is how we get there on a month-by-month basis. So we can talk about adjustments, so we can talk about additional resources that we might need, other projects that might need to come off of your plate so you can focus even more on this. So
Mm.
by January 1, 2025, we are fully operational in our ERP.
Mm.
So just as a leader, I think thinking about being very articulate and intentional about feedback loops will buy you more engagement and motivation, because employees understand when their voice will be heard, how it will be heard. That creates more of that two-way relationship we need during transformation.
Great response. So, Stephanie, you have time for two more questions.
Okay.
We spoke about culture and how
Mhm.
leaders can help to build culture.
Mhm.
My next question is, how can leaders build resilience within their
Oh,
teams to better handle ongoing changes?
yeah. The first answer is always modeling the way for resilience. The definition of resilience is
Mm.
the ability to bounce back from hard situations even stronger than where you were before the
Right,
adversity.
right.
And so I think of that as a rubber band. There's
Mhm.
an element of, if you're doing hard work together with other people, we've got to be a rubber band together, right? We're going to
Mhm.
stretch, we're going to come back. We're going to stretch, we're going to come back, but we're always going to hold this rubber band type of shape together.
Mm.
So as a leader, modeling the way is quite frankly the most successful.
Mhm.
And what comes with modeling the way does not mean always showing up with a brave face and always pretending like you're not white knuckling it, or not pretending like you have it all figured out. I think as a leader, showing vulnerability in addition to strength, or showing vulnerability as a version of strength, is going to be more successful with your employees. Because
Mhm.
if you're always putting on a brave face and your employees are scared, or they're feeling like they can't figure it out, or they don't know how to figure it out, they're not going to be willing to come to you
Mm.
when they don't know how to have when they don't have the answer, or when they're really, really stuck and it really, really impacts the bottom line or the timeline. So being willing to say, I don't know, let's figure it
Mm.
out.
Mm.
Or, hey guys, here's an example of when I thought that this was a $1 million project and it turned
Mm.
into a $2 million project. And
Mm.
here's what I learned as the warning signs along the way, where
Mhm.
all of a sudden I'm going, oh, crud, I'm spending $2 million, not a million.
Yeah.
I don't know how to navigate this with my manager.
Mm.
Sharing those stories, because that's part of what made you successful as a
Yeah.
leader,
Mm.
so your employees can feel more confident coming to you going, I don't exactly have the answer, but I feel like we're on the way to a $2 million solution, not a $1 million solution.
Mm.
Can we talk about it?
Yeah. Well said. And what I'm hearing you say is communication and walking the talk is the two important things that you've just told me, and how to
Yes.
build resilience. Thank you. And
Yes.
my
Yeah.
last question to you, Stephanie, given your vast experience in change and transformation,
Mhm.
what advice would you have for leaders who are just beginning to take baby steps on their transformation journey?
This is probably some of the same advice that I give myself, but it is because we're always in a state of change, keeping up
Absolutely.
with our
Yes.
clients and
Yes.
scaling our company. But
Yeah.
it is the one a lot of leaders we work with are very ambitious,
Mm.
meaning we don't understand that we design timelines and ask for resources that aren't enough sometimes because we're like,
Mm.
oh, of course we can pull off an ERP implementation in 2 years. And you're like,
Mm.
no, that's not how this goes. And
Mm.
so for my very ambitious leaders, understanding that plans never go according to plan,
Mhm.
take a timeline, add 30%, and then add another 30% and make that promise as the timeline.
Mhm.
It is one. Second is recognize that as you implement big transformation, there's always more levers to pull, always more resources than just time.
Mhm.
This is where employees need coaching. I hear from a lot of mid-level managers and individual contributors where their only communication tactic is, I don't have time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time.
Mhm.
As leaders, it is your role, it is our role to coach that employee to create a more nuanced response
Mhm.
because time is one resource.